it's Cecile Reynolds with Things in My Head podcast, and we are back with Tiffany Wagner. If you guys caught our episode before here, we talked with Tiffany all things organization, but I wanted to bring her back because I also like all the scoop. So we'll be talking today with her on her journey to entrepreneurship from corporate life and kind of along the lines of what that looked like for her. And hopefully for those that kind of like my story, you guys have been so supportive of it. And so I know there's a lot of women that might think they want to do that. And what does that look like? And the pros, cons, all that stuff. So before we head to that, thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Things in My Head podcast. We are so excited to be here this season 2. Follow us on Instagram, Things in My Head podcast, all written out. You can email us at thingsinmyheadpodcast.com. If you know us likely through both our businesses, this is our fun community we've built over the 13 years. Brooks Boutique is a ladies consignment boutique in Pearland, Texas, but we service all the United States. So thank you all for being part of our community. You can follow us, brooksboutique.com. Our daily lives are on Facebook, of course, at Brooks Boutique Pearland, and our Instagram and TikTok handle is Love Brooks Boutique. We also have our secondary business that is Reynolds Property Group. We are realtors. Brooke and I are realtors. And then we have, of course, the ladies as our wonderful support staff. So you can follow us on Instagram at Sweet and Petite Duo. We serve the greater Houston area. And if you know anyone that needs to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, definitely reach out and we will take care of you. Okay, so Tiffany, if you are just tuning into this one, is the founder of Marvelous Spaces. Wait, I'm sorry, I always get that wrong.
Simply Marvelous Spaces.
Simply Marvelous Spaces. You can find her with that on Instagram and Facebook. So we met through another wonderful woman entrepreneur in our area. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to her, these stories are always inspiring. Because I've been doing entrepreneurship for 13 years now with the boutique and now the real estate. But before that, and I always like to say probably, real estate is my probably 4th or 5th career. The boutique is, I guess, the 4th. And then I did corporate work before that in healthcare for 20 years or however long it was. So it's quite different. It's quite challenging. It's quite rewarding. Every entrepreneur has a story that got them there, especially if they didn't do it out of the get-go, like straight from, out of high school or college. Yes. And there's so many things that go behind that in the social media world, especially like, for instance, if you follow me, there's fun videos, there are fun lives, we have a lot of fun, and that's all the highlight reels, right? That's obviously 13 years in the making, a great community, and can be easy to think, oh my gosh, it looks so easy, so rewarding. Why shouldn't I do it? That sort of stuff. But I think anyone can do it. But I just like to bring these stories when I connect with ladies who've done it, so we can give some honest, truth. Yeah. Some honest. And so we'll I'm going to let Tiffany kind of take it over. Tell us how she got here, in my mind is, what did you do before, for how long? Sure. How did you get to where you're like, I'm done? How did you, and I think the hardest part is women say, I do want to, I have girlfriends that do this, and their kids are older or wherever in their life, and they're like, I don't want to work for somebody. I want to do my own thing. I just don't know what to do. So people have asked me that. And so we'll ask you that, how you got to organizing. And then how did you even start? How did you find your clients? You mentioned
that question still till this day,
and what are your fears?
Is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what it meant at the beginning.
It's so true. I find as we have this conversation, we will probably parallel a lot of things, and not the details, but the message and the journey. So take it away.
We're always evolving as, human beings, and, how you wear your hair and how you dress and, what you're into and your hobbies. And I never as an adult, well, as a kid, never thought that like so much change, you know, would happen. I thought, you know, I went to school, here's my career, this is what I'm going to do. And I know that the world is different now. You know, the thought processes on those things are so different now. And it's weird to be an adult and be like, oh.
Can I, is it okay? Can I ask you how old you are?
I just turned 42.
Okay. I'm 49.
2 weeks ago.
And I say that because I think that's right. Like, I think, because now my son is a senior. I talk a lot about him on the lives. But when we grew up, I'm assuming, wait, are we the same generation? I'm still X.
I guess, yeah, I am. Am I? I think I am.
I think we are. I think we're the same. Because we're right.
We're that sandwich generation.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what it's like before technology and after, and middle technology. We had the generation of technology.
Like, we're evolved. So
yes, it started with us. It evolved with us. Like, we know what it's like to not have it and to have it, and what it was and what it is now.
Okay, so we're the same generation, which is such a blessing because we do see all of that. Like, so you're right. When we were growing up, it was in my experience that you went to college and you worked that job for a long time and you climbed the ladder and you wanted stability, right? And that was the security. And it's probably because what our parents didn't have was stability. Sure. So it's very different what we both did, I think. Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
So I started in food and beverage.
As a kid, or what do you mean?
Yeah, my first job at 13, I was a hostess, and my dad and my grandfather were in food and beverage, and that's just like what I knew. My mom was in retail my whole life, and I gravitated towards food and beverage.
So what was the place? What was it?
It was a little diner at the corner.
Oh, cute, like a mom and pop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's still there. Obviously probably not the same owners it was 1,000 years ago, but you know, I loved it, you know, and that's what I did for a long time. Okay. I went to school for marketing, and then I continued in the food and beverage industry, worked in hotels and a convention center, and then I stayed home for 4 years with my son, and I loved every minute of it. It was just so fun, and I loved the experience, and then I got a little itch, and I was like, I need to do something, you know? So I started doing some little things here and there. And then I got involved as a notary.
Okay, like you notarize people.
Notarize. I didn't know that this notary community was like a whole world.
Well, how did you get involved in it?
Simply because we had a rental property in a different state from where we lived, and we did a refinance, and the bank said, we're going to send somebody to you.
Okay.
I was like, what do you, I don't even understand what that means. Like, what do you mean you're going to send somebody? He's like, oh yeah, they're just going to come to your house. And I'm like, I don't live in the same state. And they're like, they will call you and they'll arrange it. Next thing you know, this guy comes to our house, super nice. I mean, just the nicest guy. We start chit-chatting, and we're like, what's your background? How did you get into this? He came from food and beverage.
How funny.
My husband and I are sitting next to each other, and he's like, is this what you were looking for? And I was like, I think so.
You were looking for something to do.
I was looking for something to do, just to, like, you know, you fall into becoming, like, your identity as a mom, right? Which is not a bad thing. Now, I mean, look, I'm wearing a baseball mom hat. Like, you know, being a mom is a huge part of my identity. But I've always worked, and I just needed a little something that wasn't...
That was you.
You know, Sesame Street and kid stuff, right? This guy that I randomly met helped me learn the notary process.
Ah, okay.
Become a notary. Now I'm this independent signing agent. Didn't know this was a whole community. This was a whole job. Like, you as a realtor, you know this, right? Yeah. I didn't know this. So I started doing independent, you know, contract work, right? Then we move. I start, you know, now I'm taking initiative. I'm like, I need to find some more business. I need to do more. So I start reaching out to title agencies. Next thing you know, I'm working for a title agency.
Okay.
I don't have a background in title.
Like as a notary or just learning title?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So I came in kind of backwards, doing closings at the table.
I didn't know you were a closer.
I was a closer.
I didn't know that.
So normally when you work at a title agency, like, you learn how to do title, you learn the process, you learn how to research. I came in from the back end learning I knew how to do the closings. I knew the documents. I knew the process, but I didn't.
From your notary world of having people sign. Yep.
So I worked in title agency for 6 years.
So you're an escrow officer?
I was.
For 6 years?
I was.
Okay. And it was here in Houston?
I worked 4 years in another state.
Uh-huh.
Or I worked 2 years in the office in another state, and then we moved again.
Okay.
Then I worked 4 years remotely from here in Texas.
As an escrow officer.
Yep, I worked remotely.
Okay.
So I did.
And you're working full time?
80% of my job I could do remotely, other than like
nice.
Printing a loan package, going through it, and doing the actual notarizing of it is what I physically couldn't do here.
So I'm gonna just so really that in itself just getting, and because I think a lot of women have that question is how do you go from not doing the background that you necessarily went to school for, stayed home with the kids for a while, and get back in the workforce. And what it sounds like is sometimes you just have to be open to not your plan, because that was not your plan to be a notary.
It was not. I didn't even know it was a job.
Exactly. And to be open to the opportunity of things presenting itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Learning something new and being like, you know what? I can teach myself this. I can learn this. I don't need to necessarily go back to school to learn a task. You know, it was like a trade.
Yeah.
You know, so I took a course online. I learned it myself. I had somebody that was able to support me through it, and just went with it.
Yep. Okay. So that's good to know, because I think a lot of moms and women feel that way. And at that point, I'm assuming your kids were little and you didn't necessarily want to be working an 8 to 5 job, right? Like going out of the room.
We moved a lot. So I didn't have support of, hey, you know, a friend, can you watch him? Can you pick him up? I didn't have any family. We lived in places where we never knew anybody.
Yeah.
And my husband doesn't work a 9 to 5. So our flexibility wasn't, really there, and it needed to be something that worked in my schedule.
Which you were still the main caregiver of the children, so that didn't change. Your husband was the one that was going out and working. Okay.
But the difference on this was I picked the career. I was like, okay, the world is my oyster. What do I want to do? And something found me.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to give this a try, right?
Yep.
What's the worst that can happen?
And it's a journey too, because I know we're talking about that, but you're going to share how that leads to this.
Sure.
And that's why I say that, is because I think sometimes, like, I would have never necessarily thought I would own a boutique of selling pre-owned things.
Right.
That was never on my thing. I actually thought I would own a boutique, but never thought it would be like this, So it's just, and I say these stories because I think we as women, if you're anything like me, think you have to have a plan. Like, this is my plan, or even if this is not the plan, I'm going to change it to this plan. And what I find is you have to let go of the plan.
And you evolve as a person. I've been having this conversation with a very good friend of mine. She's been looking for a job, and she's trying to find a job in the career that she knows, because that's what she knows.
Yep.
And I have said to her a couple of times recently, maybe you're not that person anymore, which is really hard to receive, because
you identify as your job. Yes, I had that problem.
Yes. So she was like, I don't know, maybe. Like, the first time I said it, she was like, oh, no, I this is what I went to school for. I'm like, no, I get that. Yeah. And recently we talked about it again, and she's like, maybe I'm not. Yeah. Maybe I'm trying to force this, and it's not who I am anymore. You evolve as a person. You learn things in your life that teach you different things. And I know that sounds so vague, but it's true. Yeah. It's true.
So go back to your story, because it just goes straight into your
straight
story.
Into this. So I worked remotely for 4 years, and I got laid off unexpectedly. I didn't know it was coming, and I just went into panic. I was like, "What do you mean? I don't understand what you're saying, right?" So I remember just sitting there on the floor, and I'm like, what? How did this just happen? My first call, I called my husband, and I was like, you're not going to believe this. And he was like, great. I said, what do you mean, great? Did you hear what I just said? He's like, great. I don't, why do you keep saying great? He's like, his next response was, now you can do what it is that you want to do. Which is kind of like receiving that same information of maybe that career isn't who you are anymore. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm 40 years old. Like, now I'm going to start over. Like, what do you mean start over? Now I get to find something. Like,
so can we go back to that moment?
Yeah.
And because I had that moment, I too.
Oh gosh.
But I was laid off, and then I was fired. Right. So it was kind of the same thing. And in a career I had gone to school in and spent a lot of time in. And so in that moment when they laid you off, do you remember your feelings?
I am a very reactionary person. In my adult years, I've learned that that's who I am, and I've had to be very cognizant of that. In that moment, I did not react. I was so stunned. I actually sat in silence and did nothing. I said nothing. I was in such shock. I remember going and sitting on the stairs, and I was just staring, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, what do you
You took it personally.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
And I think that's what we as women do, because I too took it very, like the layoffs, not so much, the firing, because I think it was very political. But now understanding that I had to, like, even though I don't agree with how it happened, I think God needed that to happen.
I don't agree how it happened.
I didn't agree how it happened, but I think it needed to happen. And I obviously was not listening to the signs that I needed to do something else. And it had to be drastic for me to do something different.
Yeah. Now it was a force.
Correct.
Like, what am I gonna do?
Now, were you happy that, I mean, were you like, okay, this is fine, title's fine, you know, I could do this, but I was like,
I enjoyed it.
or you were like, I love it, I'm a title.
I don't know that I said that I love it, but I think I loved the process of it. I loved the people. I loved the interaction. I loved that it was very
organized, like steps.
It was organized.
Like,
it was
you knew
steps,
what to
right?
do.
So now going back, you know, they called me the checklist queen in the office because coming into this, I am a very process-oriented person, and there's so many steps in title, and I just couldn't understand how all these things were happening, and so I started creating these checklists of, like, if you picked up any one of my files, you could see where I was and what the next step was. And I started doing that for everything, and everyone would ask me, can you make a checklist, a process for this, a process for that?
So you were happy.
I
there.
was.
And you were like, okay, I have this great job that I can work. I mean, I have the life. I have a job that I'm 80%.
It was flexible.
Yeah, flexible.
Yeah.
I'm home with my kids. I'm bringing in some money.
I can do the things, you know, my husband's job is not flexible. So for me to be able to have some flexibility, and he couldn't, you know, it was a really nice setup.
Now, did you, before this, think of wanting to have your own business? You did, in the back of your mind.
Yes.
And your husband knew this?
He knew this because
Okay.
I bought a book
Okay.
in 2010, I believe it was, and I still have the book. So I got off the phone with him, and because he had said to me, now you can do what it is that you want to do. And I knew exactly what he was referring to, and this is what he was referring to.
Organizing.
You
Professionally organizing.
could start your own business. I couldn't do it because we moved so much. I had bought this book, you know, what was it? I don't know how many, 10, 12 years ago.
Was it about organizing?
It was.
Okay.
The title of the book is How to Start Your Own Organizing
Oh,
Business.
okay.
So
This is 2010.
this was 2010.
And when did you get laid off?
This was 2 years ago.
Okay.
So 2023.
Okay. So I say this for ladies to think that it's never too late in time in life, because I'm a testament, Tiffany's a testament to that. It's never the time you expect. It's never, that's not necessarily planned, but there are seeds along the way.
There were.
'Kay.
And, you know, we moved every, I would say 2 to 4 years. There was one place we lived for 5 years, but I could never do that. And looking back now, that time wasn't the time, right? Because now as a small business owner, it does take up more time than having a regular 9 to 5. You are the person that does all the things inside of work and outside of work. And my son's at the right age now where he has a little bit of independence, which helps me have this independence. You know, I have this inflexible flexibility sometimes. You know, when I'm at a client's house, I'm at a client's house.
Right.
You know, I'm there for
But you
6 or
scheduled
7
that.
hours.
You're the
and
one
I'm scheduling it. Yes. But when he was 3,
There'd be no way.
there would be no way I could do this.
And how old is he now?
He's about to be 11.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So
You just have one?
just one.
Okay.
So now there's that,
Yep.
hey, you know,
You can be home for a little bit by yourself.
yes.
Yep.
Whereas, again, when he was 3, and if I had to pick him up at, daycare at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever it was,
Right.
at school or whatever.
You have to.
I have to.
Right.
Or when he started kindergarten, that was like the first real structure we had, because you had to be there when the bell rings. You have to be picked up at a certain time. Now I have a little bit more flexibility because he is older. So now looking back, I'm like, there was a reason why.
Right.
With all the moving, with him being so little, I get it. But did it still hurt and did it still burn?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because we identified as how could you let me go? Right.
How could you lay me off?
Like, yeah, exactly. Regardless if you thought you were good or not or whatever, it is very personal.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
And
very
it took me a long time.
So how long in between that did you really decide to start the business?
It was immediate.
It was immediate. That was your catalyst.
It was probably a week.
Okay.
Let's call
Right.
a spade a spade. It was probably a week. I needed a minute to
Right.
be like, what in the what?
And so what did you do at the 1 week?
So I knew going into this, being a process-oriented person, if someone were to call me today, would I know what to say to them? Would I know what my process was going to be? Would I have a contract for them to sign? Would I be able to explain to them in complete fluidity what it is that I do and how I can help them? And the answer was no.
Mm-hmm.
So it was almost 2 months to the day that I pushed publish on my website, from when the day I got laid off to the day that I was like, world, here I am. March 13th was that day, and I was laid off January 17th. I spent weeks just digging, just looking, just reading, just trying to figure out, who do I want to be? And it sounds silly because it...
Not silly at all. Yeah.
When I was doing it, I was like, am I putting too much pressure on a font or a color or the way it looks and feels? And looking back now, absolutely not. Because I'm in a space, I'm in a business that I need to bring a certain element of calmness and confidence and structure to situations that don't have that.
Did you have help in that too, or did you try to do it by yourself?
I did it mostly by myself. I did reach out to a couple of people some friends of mine that have started businesses that I really looked to, like, you know what, their brand represents who they are and what they're doing and what they want people to feel. Mm-hmm. And I really leaned into that because I was like, I want that. I wanted to be able to present a sense of calmness to situations, but I wanted that to be reflected in when someone goes to my website. Is it chaotic? Does it not feel like what I'm saying I'm going to do, I'm going to be able to do? Like, are my colors aggressive and not calming? Is my font too aggressive? I really looked at those types of things. So it really gave a whole picture and a story of what I'm trying to
present
and a service that I'm trying to provide to people that are in a chaotic situation and need a sense of calm to be brought into.
Well, it's interesting because I think that and it's interesting that's your answer, because I think a lot of ladies come to me or I hear them and they think, I don't either if they didn't come from a corporate background, and especially if they did, because you have so many people that help you, or to where you're like a mom that has never, or a woman who's never done something like that in the business world, but you have this idea. And a lot of people stop themselves because they stop themselves in this immediately by saying, well, I don't know how to even start a business. I don't know anything about like an LLC or I don't know nothing, and that scares them.
Yeah, it was scary.
And that's why I was like, did you do it on your own, or did you reach out to people? Because people will ask me that all the time, and I didn't know, because even though you can say, I worked in corporate America, I was in big jobs, but in corporate America you have a department for HR, you have a department for this, and so as a small business owner, you kind of do have to figure it out on your own. Yeah. But I've also learned, and more so now, that there's so many organizations that if you don't have a friend that knows, like you could come to either one of us and we'd be like, okay, you got to do this and you blah, blah. But is there's a lot of organizations, typically, especially in smaller towns or even bigger ones, like in Pearland, we have an organization that is a subsidy of our Chamber of Commerce,
Sure.
like the Pearland Innovation Hub, who will help small business owners do the things they don't even
Start
know
up.
to not know. Like you wouldn't even know what to ask,
Sure.
you know? And so I would encourage people to look in their towns for something like that.
Yeah.
If
And there are
nonprofits.
small businesses whose business is that.
Yeah.
Helping businesses start up, how to do your LLC, how to, do a trademark if that's what you want to do, how to do, a bank account and all those types of things. There are businesses that is their business.
Yeah, and don't let that stop you, because the things that are particular to your business, you will have to work on, like your branding and your message and your services and your price point and all that stuff. But the things that are kind of general, don't let that stop you because you don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, and don't let it be scary because you're not the only one also.
Right.
Because I think I hear that a lot is, oh, okay, but also now I mentioned this earlier, is we do want to acknowledge the fact that, oh, it sounds great, I want to do it. But some people are not in a capacity to, like, if you've heard my story a little bit, mirrors a lot of Tiffany's, where the job was a hard stop, and then the income is a hard stop. Now, we were fortunate to have husbands who worked and was able to still get money into the family, and were supportive of the idea of starting. So not everyone has that. So we want to acknowledge that as well. Like sometimes you're like, but I can't not have a paycheck. And some are that you start these businesses on the side while you're working your full-time job.
You learn the
Yes.
things, how to do the LLC. You begin, what is my brand looking like? And I had notebooks and pages with just words or phrases or things and thoughts so that I could look and see, what speaks to me, what on this page is jumping out at me, and that was 2 months of time just putting all those things together. So that's not to say, to your point, in the background, you're not starting to jot down those ideas and start that creative process so that you can, on the side,
Right.
start it up and have all that stuff already done.
Which we know just from our work in the boutique that a lot of ladies that follow us do have side gigs. One, Lauren, who is our daughter, and she a couple months ago asked us a question like, what is the other things people do? And we were shocked at how many of our ladies, besides their full-time job, had something of their own that they were doing on the side for joy, for extra money, for in hopes of making it a full-time. So we don't want to not acknowledge that there's
Absolutely.
different ways to get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now let's talk about fears. Like,
Sure.
what were the true fears? Because I had tons. So what were your fears, and what are your fears then? And then what are your fears now? And, kind of talk us through, again, not the highlight reels.
Sure. I would say the biggest fear was somebody not taking me seriously.
Yes, I had that.
Showing up at client number one's house on day number one of work, and me not portraying or representing what I'm here to do, and them not taking me seriously or
Did they
believing
know
me.
you were their first client?
No.
That's a great, and I say that because people think that, like, when you start real estate, like, my true first clients had no idea they were my first true clients. Right. And so you don't have to be like, hi, you're my first client, yay!
Right. And I spent a lot of time practicing.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time taking apart spaces in my house and putting them back together, timing myself. I know that sounds silly, but someone's going to ask me, how long is this going to take?
True.
Even now, it's an estimate, don't get me wrong, but you don't know how long until you really get into something, because you're there and you're just taking a quick look, or someone's sending you some pictures, but you don't know what's in these boxes or in these drawers, and what you have to go through, physically go through, but just kind of timing myself on how quickly does a project take me, does a pantry, typically it's 6 hours, and they're like, oh, 6 hours? Yeah, because you got to pull everything out. You have to clean stuff. You have to, but timing myself, I practiced at my house. I practiced it at friends' houses, and that was also, I used that to build
the portfolio. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So technically it just meant it was their first paid client, but you've had multiple clients that you were able to do. So it's a good point. And I say that because I think we inherently stop ourselves from, and because we have like, it's a thing, imposter syndrome. Like, why would they use me? This person has 20 years on me or whatever. They're going to ask, how long have I been doing this? And you're not lying. You've been doing it all your life, for 10 years. You might not have had a business doing it, but you've been doing it. So I think that's something we like to point out, because we can stop ourselves real quick, in this world of what ifs, especially as women. So I wanted to acknowledge some of that. So that was a fear before. What is your fear 2 years in? And how do you cope with it?
My fear 2 years in.
As you know, we did not prep these questions for her, because those are the real conversations.
I don't know. Like we were talking about before, like things are forever evolving and changing, and one of the biggest lessons I learned going into this, being a type A personality, like you said, is letting go of things. I've tried to really let go of that type of thought process, because I'm just trying to figure things out. So I don't want to evade your question, but
I think that's a fair answer, because I do think that
it's hard to have a plan.
Yeah. And I think that's what we learn in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you 13 years in that this is how I saw the boutique year one, or even 5 years ago. I mean, COVID changed us dramatically. If I'm going to answer that question, and it might be different because I have a staff, my biggest fear is making the right decisions for them, because I know a lot of people rely on the boutique doing well. I'm responsible for young ladies and their lives.
You know what? And it's funny you say that, because I envision that. Obviously, like my goal is to have a business and hire people and, be able to support other people, in the community, and, have a business like you, where you have a team of people and you're impacting so many more lives on such a bigger scale. Like I think about that all the time. Like hiring somebody is scary.
Yeah, it is. And we can talk a lot more about that on a side note. About who you hire, like what is the first person you hire, and it should be someone that takes something off your plate. So that's always the first hire, not someone who can do what you love doing. You have to hire someone who does the things you don't like doing, so you could.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
It's 100% true.
That's not the first time I've heard that. Because when you like you said, you ask other small businesses, how have you done things? What are the things that I need to be aware of that I don't know about? And, I leaned into that at the beginning, asking other people that I'm friends with, like, what do I do about this? What do I do about this? And going back to the very beginning when you had said, how did you start?
Yeah.
And I remember, saying to Joe on the phone, I was like, how am I going to do that? And he kept saying, you're just going to start. I'm like, I don't understand what that means. What do you mean just start? I reached out to one of my girlfriends who has a very successful business, and I said, can I come over? I need some help with things. And she said, you're just going to start. And I said, why do people keep saying that? She said, no, it doesn't make sense, but you're just going to start. And I was like, okay, well, I hit publish on my website and I just started. And I know it sounds wild, because it's not direction, but it is direction.
Correct. Yeah. It's very ambiguous, this entrepreneurship life. And I bring that up to ladies because I think if you grew up like we did, you're given a plan, like you're going to go to college, you're going to get a job, you're going to get married, you're going to, blah, blah, you're going to raise your kids, all this stuff. But then something happens and you have to go off that plan. And so and truly why I ask questions like this, because I think if I was back in that shoes and someone said that, and if you're sitting there right now listening to this and have either wonder or have this idea, but you're like, I really don't know what to do. And so I'm hoping you got something out of here and we ask the question you would ask, and even though you might not gotten a direct answer, because a lot of times the answers are not direct. Some are direct, like we said, like you can go to an organization, go to someone you know, you can figure out, type in how to start an LLC in my state. That stuff is like, I wouldn't have even known to ask that question, honestly. But it is that I would say you talk to someone who's done it. And in a way that is supportive of you and loves you, and will give you the answers, and probably not in direct competition, in all fairness.
And everybody's going to give you a different answer. So if you ask multiple people, they're going to give you different tidbits that the other person didn't give you. So then you start to kind of form this list of, you get a little bit from each person. And sometimes someone in your own industry, when I first started doing this, I actually sat down with somebody in
organizing
in my industry, and
but in the same town.
She's not far away.
Oh, interesting. Because most of the time people will say they don't do it in the, like, not directly. Because even if someone sat with me and said, I want to start a resale business, I've sat with them before. Am I going to give you all my trade secrets? Probably not. But I'm going to tell you how to start an LLC.
Yeah. But here's the moral to that story.
Yeah.
Starting your own business is all about planting seeds. And the seeds you plant are not for the now. They are for the future you. And I say this because I sat down with her and she gave me a lot of really great information. And 6 months later, she called me and said, I have a job. I need somebody else to do it with me. Will you come in and work the job with me?
Oh, nice.
And we've done, I don't even know how many jobs since then.
And it's true, because I will say, and I say that maybe because I've been burned, because I have had people who've come in, worked with me, and then literally took my contract and started their own business, and it didn't work. And mainly because my contract and my business was mine. Like, what they didn't have was me.
Correct.
Because they should have started their own. Like, sure, I mean, the contracts can be similar, but you can't emulate somebody else.
Correct. And this goes back to the whole branding thing at the beginning. Spending time on developing and designing a business around who you are, what your personality is, what the feeling is you want to portray, and what the feeling is you want people to receive. You give off a different aura and feeling than somebody else, and your business brings in what attracts to you.
Right. Yes. So I know that we're going a little long, because these conversations we can talk forever, because these are the conversations I love having, because the backstories are what I think I have no idea, and I hope you guys will write to us and let us know what you got from this conversation, so we can know
with you.
what resonates, what helped, what didn't help, what questions I didn't ask that you wish I would have, and we can do follow-ups, because I think sometimes it's just a lot of secrets or a lot of what ifs, or you don't have anyone to go to. This is why we started this anyway, this whole series of this season, Jen, right? Where we were like, how can we bring people on that, if you had to ask someone, do we have someone to ask? And a lot of times it is these kind of life questions. Some things it's specific to, organizing. Other times it's specific to life. How do we get here? So I hope you guys are enjoying this season and this series. And if, again, we would love your feedback. You can ask us. I know Tiffany and I are both open to how we got to our stories. We're always open to recommendations. If you're like, have you thought of this, sort of thing. So don't think we've got it all figured out.
Entrepreneurship is a forever evolving beast.
Forever. And again, hopefully, and who knows, like, we could sit here in a year, and I would have, like 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that we were going to add real estate to our repertoire, and here we are. In 1 year, I don't know what I'm going to tell you where we are, and it's very much just kind of go where the yeses are and where life takes you, and where you hear the whispers, and always listen. Don't have your own plan, because when you have your own plan, God has a different one.
Be open to what finds you, because I thought, going into I had such like specific thoughts on what I thought it was going to be. Took a hard left.
Amen.
And it has been
humbling.
It's been better than I thought.
Good.
Things have found me that I like better than what I thought it was going to be.
I love that. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly how to say it. Like, you just don't know until you try something. So if this helped anyway, please let us know. We love you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And share with your friends, anyone that you might think would enjoy this conversation. Again, you can, Jen will put all our contact in the show notes, so that way you can reach out to us. And we love you. We appreciate you. And you are not alone. And in Pacific, you have us. So hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will chat again soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.